In a new age of watchmen, a team of individuals, pooling their talents and abilities, come together to bring analysis, reaction, and comedy to the fold. This is their chronicle. This is Accounting Arc.
Hey everyone, welcome to our Accounting Arc, and today our special guest is Jina. Jina, can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're located, what your role is, and what is the work that you do now?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Donny. I am Jina Etienne. I am a CPA, and I'm also a certified diversity executive. My pronouns are she, her. I am in Maryland, which is just north of Washington, D.C., and I still think of myself as a recovering CPA. I was in practice for 20-something years, and today I work with accounting firms and organizations in the accounting industry, or as a profession overall, in helping build inclusive cultures where people feel safe and there's psychological safety, there's intentionality around the cultures and the experiences that organizations want to have for their people. So that's what I do day to day.
That sounds so different from accounting.
Just a little bit.
How did you come to do that? Like what does that actually involve?
Yeah. So, today there's a big pushback or backlash or pulling away from DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, add B, belonging. So DEIB. And I think it's just because the language that we've been using, it feels like we're separating people out and classifying and categorizing people. But in fact, the work that I'm doing and where I want to spend my time is on, understanding what does it feel like to work in these organizations, and how do we create visibility and safety for those of us who are the only one in the room, or one of the few in the firm, or there's only one person that looks like me in this department, whatever the case may be. And the looks like me could be height, it could be age, it could be weight, it could be language, it could be anything. How did I come to this work? Well, my whole accounting career I describe as Plinko, right? I just went to college and then bing, 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 bing. And over the course of the years, I went this way, then that way, then this way, then that way. And here I am. After I had my own firm for 17 years, and after I sold my firm, I went to the AICPA, and that was a shift in my career where I started looking holistically at the profession and looking at the different types and styles of being a CPA in practice and how can we support all of them. And then after that, I went to NABA, National Association of Black Accountants. Then today, it's just called NABA. I was the CEO there, and that's when I did sort of the hard pivot into this work, where we were looking exclusively at how do we support minorities, in particular, special emphasis on African American. But that really changed, gave me something to ground my identity into. I left NABA and I was the director of diversity and inclusion at Grant Thornton. And then when I left there, I started this practice. So I have never left public accounting, but I went from just generically identifying as a CPA and doing the technical work all the way to where I am today, which is understanding the experience of what does it feel like to work here? And I mean that for every one of us. And from a, I don't want to say D&I because I'm not focused on the minorities. I want to know what it feels like for all of us to work here and really give that some thought. Accounting is not what people think it is. And so that's why I think this work is universal and important.
Let's build on that, because I like the way you said accounting is not the work that people think it is. What is it then?
Well, I can't tell you how many times when I meet somebody and they, you're a CPA, oh, you must be good with numbers. You must be good at math. You must be good with numbers. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because accounting isn't math. And it's like there's this stereotype, like if we can dig ourselves out of this stereotype, I'm going to say we've won something as an industry and as a profession, because accounting is systems and policies and practices that they are represented by numbers, but we don't do numbers. That's not what accountants do. Our work tells stories. I specialized in tax when I was in practice, and a tax return at the end of the day, if you know what you're looking for and you understand it, it tells you the story of somebody's life and everything that happened to them this year. Did they have a child? Did they buy a car? Did they buy a house? Get a new job? Um, are they close to retirement? Did they retire? Have they struggled with like a chronic health condition? I can tell you all of that by doing their tax return. I don't do the tax return from the numbers. I learned the stories and experiences, had relationships with my clients, and they all boil down into a number on the tax return. But if you see it as filling out soft forms and just filing in the software, that is a small piece of the work.
Well, and you and I have talked specifically about even this whole DEI work often gets reduced to numbers.
Yep.
But you said your focus now is not on DEI. So can you expand a little bit on that? How do you go beyond the numbers in what we're looking at in DEI?
Yeah, that's a great question, because first I want to decouple the terms: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. Distinctly different concepts. And sometimes I get frustrated the fact that they're sort of jumbled in this one pile. Diversity is about the numbers. Diversity is about the demographics, and they don't look good in our industry. So yeah, we need to think about diversity. Why is there a lack of diversity? What can we do to increase the diversity in our work, in our profession? So diversity. Equity is, what does it feel like to work in this industry? We know a lot of people are starting to tap out because tax season, the stress of tax season, it used to be like a badge of honor, and I survived tax season. And now they're like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing this stressful thing. But there are a lot of industries that are stressful. Why are we getting a bad rap? Is it because there's not enough equity, i.e., tools, resources, and environment, so that everybody can be set up for success? Donnie, what you need to be successful is not necessarily the same as what I need to be successful. And an equitable environment, if you and I worked in the same firm, you could get the tools you need. I could get the tools I need. Some of them are the same tools. And we're both successful. Inclusion is my intention and how I show up here and express my openness and willingness to engage. How do I create space for you, Donnie, and us when we're working together in an engagement, so that you don't feel like I'm judging you or shaming you or putting you down or disrespecting you? Like, how do I show up to do that? My values and who do I want to be as a professional? So if I'm thinking about me, belonging then is, what is your experience working with me? And so inclusion and belonging, two sides of the same coin, but they are two different sides. And this work is important because I don't think we've thought about any one of those pieces. Because we're numbers, highly intellectual, we're very smart in an industry that we're so analytical that our feelings we'll leave them over there. I got to do the numbers. Well, we're human and we all have these feelings and emotions, and we want to feel connected at work. So that's why I don't want to call it DEI, because it's not diversity and inclusion. It is all of those four elements. And while they're interrelated, they are distinctly different ideas. And I'm hoping, if I could change some minds and some thoughts, that's the first thing I would want to change, is to just decouple these ideas. Because when you put them all together, you put them in a box, you dismiss them, and you don't address any of them. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think I think you're hitting on what I think is another myth, is that as accountants, we're not people persons.
Yeah.
And anyone that's actually, I think, been to, any of the events, whether it's State Society, AICPA, you find a lot of people out there. I mean, everyone's networking, they're talking with each other. There's personalities, that are in the room. And the other thing I see as I look at that too is there's so many people in our profession that care about their clients and students and, younger professionals, that they give back so much time to the community through nonprofits, to volunteering with students and at colleges. We're actually a very people-centric profession.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I've said this before and it sounds horrible, but if you think about inventory in a business, right? If you think about a car dealership, a car manufacturer, or like a food supplier in the supply chain, there are widgets and things that they need. They need things. Our industry, we need the human mind. We need the hearts and the minds of people. And so at our very core, we are people working with people to help people. So we are very much a people business, but we don't use those words. We don't talk about it that way. And sure, like every industry, there's like this archetype. We generally do tend to be more conservative. We generally do tend to be quieter. Some of us, we generally do tend to fill in the blanks, all those stereotypes. Chimamanda Adichie in her TED Talk, It's a Danger of a Single Story. I recommend it for everybody. She has this saying that I thought was brilliant. The problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. And I think that's important because when you look at the stereotype of an accountant or a CPA, you could probably throw 10 or 12 adjectives into this pot. For any one of us, maybe 8 of them are true and 4 of them are not. But the combination of the 8 for you or for me are different. So I think we are very much people. We just show up differently. We behave differently because our industry as a service provider we behave differently in meetings with our clients than doctors do with their patients, than lawyers do with their clients. That doesn't make us not people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. People? Can you say people?
I think we can.
Does that make sense? We have personality. We have ranges of senses of humor. Some of us have none, to be fair. And some of them are like Greg Kite. He's a comedian, right? And he's an accountant, CPA, I believe. So, He is.
The other thing that you brought into there, and I can't remember if you said heart or love. I think you said heart. That's the other piece that I think people often think that we are completely heartless. But, looking at someone like you, and it's not just you, there's a number of CPAs, accountants out there that are working in this DEIB field and are truly trying to make strides in it and really help get some larger adoption going beyond just numbers and looking at this. I often, when I talk with others too, I hear them say, why did you become an accountant? Well, it's because I want to help people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't because I love tax or I love numbers or I love that. Again, there might be some of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't hate. Some of us did love tax. I'm just saying.
Yeah, all that ties back, I think, into this, our mission. And actually, this is our mission for the center, which is to help improve the world. It's not just make us more financially successful. And you see this coming with this whole ESG movement, mm-hmm. environmental social governance reporting, is that we're looking beyond just the dollars, right. and looking at a lot of other things that are going on.
Yeah, I don't think we think about. So one of the challenges we have in our industry, because we work so closely with clients, I might have a client in, let's say, the food industry, specifically beverages, mm-hmm. or beet sugar, right? Like very specific. And because of that client, okay, so I actually had a client in beet sugar industry. Like, I don't know why that came up. Okay. It's very specific, but you are in such granular detail in working with the client that sometimes we forget to zoom out and understand that beet sugar, food industry, related to health, related to socioeconomic conditions and trade relations, and it affects everything. And I think as accountants, and you and I have talked about this, we know others that are working on this. How do we, as an industry, look up and zoom out so that we understand the domino effects and the interconnectedness of the work that we do? Because I can calculate the net profit or loss of my client. But can I also calculate the carbon emissions use? Can I calculate I don't know, I'm trying to think about a number of different ways that I can think about those numbers as it relates to my client, the community, society, globally. I think that's where I'm hoping to see us as an industry move.
Mm-hmm.
We don't usually talk about that stuff because in the past, people have put accountants in the box. They don't want to hear us talk about those things. Part of that is because we've never told them that we could.
Completely agree with you. Yeah, because all of that, I think what you're really describing is decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that as accountants, that's a large part of what we're doing is we're trained to help provide decision support because we're not usually the ones making the decision.
Right.
But we're providing the information, which originally was financial information.
Right.
But now it's all this other type of information, like you've discussed, that we are now helping. Hey, let's present this whole picture. What is the carbon outputs? What are some of the risks that are involved? How are we going to mitigate those risks? What's the people aspect to things? How does this impact what we're doing in the people area and creating belonging, which is really where you're at now.
And those numbers aren't just dollars. I mean, looking at diversity demographics, there's accounting there. There are measuring the shifts and trends around people. And it could be measuring in terms of actual number of humans. Mm-hmm. It could be measuring in terms of, like analytics, trends over time. Unfortunately, there's math there. And I don't know, your very role, what you do in this profession, you aren't an accountant doing accounting, but you are in the industry, which is another example of the diversity of this industry. Mm-hmm. And so many others are like, you and I, that we operate in and around the industry without actually doing accounting.
Well, and if someone wanted to follow your footsteps in your career or do what you're doing, maybe not quite the career, because that's quite a bit that you've done there. But if they wanted to end up doing what you're doing, what would your advice be to them? How do they get into that career path?
I think the first thing is knowing who do you want to be when you grow up. And I don't mean that in terms of, I want this job. What I would invite people to think about is, if you look forward in your life and so imagine yourself, your older self, right? Looking back over your life, what are you going to feel accomplished with? What is it that you feel like where you could make a difference? It's about your sort of self-actualization. All right, now how do you get there? Well, in order to get there, there are going to be different types of jobs and roles. This is where ideation can come in handy because there's more than, that's a horrible saying. I was going to say the one about there more than one way to do these skin things. I won't say it. It's a horrible saying. But there are lots of paths you can take. So once you start thinking that way, instead of going, I need to go to this job and get this promotion to do that thing, think about the work itself. The work. So if the work you want to do is helping firms reimagine their culture, empower connection, create psychological safety, and give managers the tools they need to support a more diverse workforce, then what are the components of that and how can you start to get involved in some of those components? Because as soon as you raise your hand to volunteer, and anybody who knows this, who's ever volunteered, as soon as you volunteer, you're going to get tapped on the shoulder again and again. And that also requires for you to show a bit of bravery and vulnerability, and that's the hardest part. The hardest part of this work is, and for me, I bring my lived experience in this industry to my job and to my work every day. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm not white and I am not male. I am cisgender. English is my first language. I grew up in an area where I have some degree of financial, I want to say privilege, because there's lots of different types of privilege. So there's some barriers that I didn't have, and there are other ones I did experience. And I share those in this industry, talking to others who did not necessarily have my experience. And I've learned from others and they've learned from me, but you got to be willing to share your story. So I think to get into this work, it's those couple of things. It's find what calls you, raise your hand and volunteer, and start thinking about storytelling. How can you share your story? And then how does that tie into the work you want to do? The rest sort of happens naturally.
I would completely agree with you, because I feel like I've kind of stumbled my way through my story as we've kind of come through as well. You know, in there you mentioned bravery as being really important. And I know when people think about brave, they think of that warrior or that soldier that's going out there.
Yeah.
And I think as accountants, we're brave, or in accounting, maybe I should say, we're brave in a different way. I often think of us being these agents of transformation. Have you ever felt like you've saved the day for your clients? And can you share an example of how you've been this brave person and kind of come in and help the client?
So this one story absolutely comes to mind. It was when I was in practice. The client was a retiree. She's also a woman I'd known my entire life. So when she came and asked me if I would help her with her taxes, tax planning, tax prep, I felt honored. And I didn't keep her in the same categories as objectively as I did some other clients. And then something happened. She had a situation come up on her tax return. And I made some assumptions about her. And based on those assumptions, I did her tax return, and the result was not good. She was going to owe a lot of money. And I asked her to come into the office to talk about these things. I normally would have gone to her place because she wasn't particularly mobile, but I didn't feel like I could safely go there. I don't know why, psychologically. So when she came, I started into this small talk, and I had these conversations with her. And then she shared a little story about her sister. That story was a fact that actually changed the context of the work that I had to do, which gave me a completely different approach, a fact that made the difference. And I was able to stop, wait, hold on, go do the work. It was a very different tax outcome. And I feel like the bravery for me in that example was inviting her in to have what I thought was going to be a really difficult conversation. And then explaining to her, admitting that that piece of data that you just gave me changes everything that I need to do. Let me come back to you with the final result. Now, to be fair, I didn't tell her how bad my first number was, but what I did tell her is that this is a game changer and it will create a very different result. And that difference is positive. You don't ever want to tell your client that you made a mistake. And so I didn't admit it exactly, but that was one that I was terrified to have that conversation. And I found a safe way to say I'd made a mistake. That's the thing that popped up when you were asking about bravery. Maybe it's not as a bravery question the way you asked it, but that's the thing that popped up.
But I think that does really show the we can have. And actually, the thing I like about that story that you gave is it brought back in that piece, right? Because it was tied to her sister, and she was telling you that story. Because I know a lot of times, especially, and I used to do this when I was younger too. It's like, yeah, come on, get rid of. Tim is telling me your sister, you're working with older people. It's like, oh, here we go again. They're telling me the story, right? But you sit and you listen, you get these gems, and luckily this time the gem actually helped reduce their tax burden there. So I think it's totally valid, and it shows you again why you need to have that people aspect to be a really good accountant.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, you're talking about the stories of our, hearing my grandparents or my uncle or my aunt telling a story, and you're like, oh dear God, here we go again. But how many times have we done that and we heard something new that we didn't hear before?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't hear it the last 10 times, but for whatever reason, this time you heard it. It's because I'm in a different place. It's because I'm looking through a different lens. It's because I'm taking a different approach. It's because something I'm going through in my life right now, and that's resonating. if we can bring that experience to our work with our clients, that's what makes all the difference.
Completely.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, if we have time,
Sure.
time to ask you a question.
Sure.
You talked about earlier, we do help people make decisions and people come to us to make decisions. In your work, I think going back, maybe 15 years in this industry, do you remember when we just started holding ourselves out as business advisors, like really leaning into that?
Mm-hmm.
And that was different. And that almost was like not risque, but there was a certain amount of bravery to come out and say, not only can I do the numbers, but I can help you understand the numbers. In fact, I can help you make better decisions. In fact, I can be your partner in decision making and be your business advisor. So do you remember that? And is that part of what has really fueled your practice and your business?
It is. And it's so interesting that you bring that one up, because that was where I was already, I think, starting to be one of the influencers or thought leaders in our profession. And I had never, even though my firm is an accounting firm, we are a registered CPA firm, I never put myself forward as that within the profession, because it was like, well, we didn't do any traditional services. And when it started coming to that, when that started coming forward, and this is actually really, I think it was like 5 or 6 years later, and this years ago, where when they were describing what the new firm was, this advisor that was really making an impact, new stuff, I went, wait a minute, that's what we do.
Yeah, we're already doing that. Yeah.
I was like, we are the firm of the future that they're all talking about, because we're not compliance focused. We are completely advisory focused. So yeah, thanks for asking.
And now there are a lot of firms and companies like yours, but that was a shift that the industry had to make, that mindset shift. And now we're here again talking about a mindset shift about the way we see people.
Yes.
And about the environment that we think people want to work in culture-wise in our organizations, and about how we show up with our clients.
Completely.
Because now we have to show up more vulnerably. We have to be able to tell those stories and share. They don't care that, what's that saying? They don't care that you know until they know that you care, or something like that.
Yes, something like that.
It didn't always apply to our industry.
Yeah.
But I think it does today, that people want to know we care, that we don't see them as just numbers.
Just numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on this concept of being a superhero. What do you think makes someone a real life superhero?
Bravery.
Somehow I knew that was going to be your answer. And so if you were a superhero, what is your superpower?
Oh, I do think my superpower is ideation and creativity. And it's been a barrier for me in the past, because I didn't have a language for it. I didn't know that's what it was called, the thing that my brain does. But for me, it is being able to take an idea and another idea and a different idea and actually see connections between them, and then imagine things that can come from that. And
tell me that you're a creative accountant with an imagination.
What?
Talking about breaking stereotypes.
What? So that's my superpower, and I think it's my superpower. And the bravery behind that, the vulnerability behind that, is you're sharing with people ideas that sometimes they look at you like, that makes no sense. I have no idea where you're coming from. What does that have to do with me, kind of thing. And sometimes it's okay, you are now seen as a thought leader. And other times people just say, yeah, that's just Jina, right? And then years later, they're like, oh, that's what you were talking about. So I've had to learn to explain and articulate that better. But I've learned to, I would rather share my idea than hold it in, if it can help somebody. And if it's not, I mean, what did it cost me? Cost me an idea. That does require some bravery, because at some point you get your feelings hurt. So. Yeah.
When earlier you mentioned vulnerability, let me ask you vulnerability in a different question. So you've told us what your strength is, your superpower. What's your critical vulnerability?
I don't value myself as much as I feel like I could or should. I feel like, okay, now I'm going to get emotional. Don't do that to me,
Yeah,
Donny.
I would not have expected that one from you.
Yeah. Um, I often say, well, why me? You can't tell you how many times I have met with a client. I share an idea. They think this is, oh, wow, I've never heard it put that way before. I love the way you look at it. And before the call, I would walk into the call thinking, well, why would they listen to me? Like, what difference does it make? What do I know? I mean, it's not like I went out and did some master's thesis research on the demographics of the accounting industry, although I've done a lot of research on the demographics and the history. I've always struggled with, but why me? You know? And so I think that one of my vulnerabilities is, and my insecurity about, I just feel like I might be misunderstood. Some of it has to do with my experience around ideation and sharing ideas that I didn't know how to express it so that people could understand where I was coming from. So that experience, I sometimes feel like my opinions don't matter. My ideas are just so out there that nobody's going to listen to them, or people are going to secretly roll their eyes, or they're laughing at me. You know, that is very much it. It's not quite imposter syndrome, but the internal feelings are the same.
I can identify with that completely. I feel the same, being one of those kind of towing the bleeding edge on a lot of this stuff. You often feel it feels like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I've learned, which I definitely value all the ideas that you're bringing. It's why part of the reason I'm interviewing you and I'm working with you on so many things is there has to be those of us that are willing to push that edge, that are willing to take that risk and be brave, you know, and really put some different ideas out there, because we're not going to solve the problems that we have today by taking the same approach. And earlier when we were prepping, you and I talked about how when you look at the research and you look at the things, it's like the same people, the same approach. And we need more people thinking differently, but yet within the construct. And I think that's one of the big underlying messages you gave, is that accounting is not the numbers. The processes and structure that we do in accounting provides a construct that we all can work in, that we know will help people be more successful in the end.
Absolutely. I know. And, you know, when we first started working together, that's the same way that I felt, that you were talking about D&I. That's what we'll just call it, D&I.
It was at that time.
In a non-traditional sense, which is so important, because that structure that you talk about, the framework that is the industry, we all come to it from different places with different experiences in different ways. And while we do the same work, we do it differently. You can think so simply as some of us are right-handed. There are a few of us that are left-handed. And we know this means we have different challenges around keyboards and pens and you know, a whole bunch of things. That's just one really simple example that most people go, oh no, that makes sense. But understanding that framework is what we share, the passion for the work, the experience, and the intellect, because we are all very smart, very highly educated people. But after that, the rest is, you know, that's where we are different. And just like everybody else, we just don't always tell people that. We keep our beautiful diversity a secret from the rest of the world.
And part of that, I think, too, though, is the humbleness. And that's what I see a lot in our, we are not that extrovert. I know you're a little more of an extrovert. You're definitely more of an extrovert than I am, but we're not that extrovert that's like, hey, look at me and all these fabulous things that I'm doing. A lot of us are that quiet behind the scenes. Okay, let's get this go through. Let's help this client. Okay, great. We got them to, you know, we're able to help them.
Yeah.
Always so great to talk with you, Jina. If others want to reach out to you and talk to you and learn more about what you're doing, how can they get in contact with you?
LinkedIn is always good. I have a website. It's etienneconsulting.com. The challenge with my name is it's Etienne, which means you have to know how to spell it. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I might have a link on the center. I don't remember. I think I might be there.
You do have one, yeah. And let's spell your name out real quick just for people.
Yeah. JINAETIENNE. It's like the shoe. People have seen the shoe. Etienne.
Ooh,
Okay, you're like, nope, I don't know that's you.
I'm not Shoe person, but
I don't know that's you.
spelled it out, so we'll be able to find you now. Thank you again for being on with me on this episode today, and thank you to all of you that are listening out there. I hope you will join us again for another episode of The Accounting Art.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.